Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. I'm here with Adam Winters. I'm Joe Gould, and we're looking at another OVA, original video animation, Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie from 1996, at least in Japan.
Yeah, when did it hit America? I remember it was a staple of Suncoast movie store at the mall.
Ha! Never heard that one. So it originally released as 2 episodes in Japan, rentals, January 26th, and then March 22nd of 96.
Long time to wait.
It was later licensed and dubbed in English by ADV Films as a direct-to-video for the U.S. in September 7th, 1999.
Boy, September.
And it coincided...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Dreamcast. It was promotional there.
Yeah, so it came out basically the same time with the international release of Sonic Adventure.
Yeah.
I will say an English movie in America coming out at the same time as the international part of Sonic Adventure, man, that screams Sega, doesn't it?
Well, Sega's never... You can always commend Sega for being somewhat of a visionary studio, but not necessarily one that made great business decisions in the time when they needed to make great business decisions.
Sounds about right, yeah. Each of the international OVAs was about 28 minutes. The English dubbed version was 54 minutes. I'm assuming that's just credits to be the only difference there.
I think it's uncut content-wise. But I had always thought they made some censorship, but it's not. I didn't notice any censorship. Like even when he makes the finger at one about midway through the movie, that's in there.
I missed that.
Oh, okay.
We can discuss. And then just real quick, it has not been released for a long time because
Probably never will be.
Yeah, I don't really understand how this works, but apparently Sega and all their impotence can't find key documents tied to the music or voice actors. So basically, they can't figure out who they are and how to pay them.
Horrific history of archives at Sega across the world, I suppose. Bad archiving in America. That's been documented in several instances related to comic books, animated deals.
Can you shed some light on their incompetence?
Where to begin? Let me start with, I guess we can start on the Japanese side. The original source code to the 16-bit video games. They never saved those. And that's why they've always had trouble anytime and they've done it a lot. They re-released the original Sonic the Hedgehog, but stuff just didn't right. And they had a lot of trouble even when they struck a deal to do the Sonic Mania game, which was really a continuation of the original game. The fan creators had to figure it all out from scratch. They didn't have a source code they could go to. When it comes to, we'll start with the American cartoons by Deke Entertainment. And Sega signed a deal with Deke Studio to do the animation, and they had a deal with ABC to air it on television. And the TV, there were multiple Sonic shows by Deke, but the one that ran on Saturday morning, it ran for 2 seasons, and it ended on a cliffhanger that a lot of fans have yet to really get over. And the question is, why did the show end? And most people thought the ratings weren't good enough to justify another season. All the networks were moving on from animated program to either educational stuff at government insistence under the Clinton years, or there were too many live action shows. They wanted to get that market. As it turns out, Sega ended the deal with Deke after the 2nd season. This just came to light this year, in my knowledge. Have you heard about this?
I don't think so.
Man, so what happened?
If I did, I forgot about it.
I think it just came out because archival documents were actually found of intercompany correspondence. So the Deke Animation Studio, as was very common in this era, they viewed their own animated production art as their property. And they would put these animated production elements, animation cells, line work, they would sell them at different places. Turns out it was in the contract. That stuff was supposed to be owned by Sega, whether it was Sega of America, Sega of Japan, I don't remember. But Sega said, you can't be doing this. We own that stuff. And they said, we're canceling the deal. Now, oddly enough, Sega struck a new deal with Deke a few years later, during this time period when the Dreamcast was out, 1999. And you would think, oh man, they're going to either revamp the old show, finish the season, or maybe they're going to adapt the new Sonic Adventure Dreamcast material. No, they created a show called Sonic Underground. I don't even want to talk about it.
Was that the musical show?
Yes, Sonic had a brother and a sister, and they were all voiced by Jaleel Steve Urkel White.
Okay.
And they were in a
You,
band, and they were fighting Robotnik, but they were trying to find their long-lost mother, who was still out there watching over them secretly. And the show went about 50-some episodes, and they never found their mother. The show had no conclusion. The comic books. We got to talk about the bad Sega.
hey, real quick,
Oh, man.
before I forget. So I don't do brain science or rocket surgery, but you're telling me they don't have the code to the original Genesis games. Wouldn't they be on the cartridges?
Yeah, but it's different to rip it from a cartridge than it is to actually have a source code you can use to build new games using that same engine.
Okay. Maybe I just don't understand exactly how that works enough. Feels like you could just
So
type it out.
it's no excuse for getting emulation wrong, because you just got to run the game the same way the original hardware did, because you got the
Right.
ROMs. Nintendo's not above that either. For Virtual Console, they ripped NES ROMs of Super Mario Brothers off the internet, and they put it on Virtual Console, and then they sued the people who put the ROMs up. So it's an industry problem, but Sega's had more trouble with it than others. If you would like me to continue their other legal spats.
Well, no, it's just it just confused me a little bit. All right, you want to move on to the movie?
Unless you want me to talk about all the problems with Sonic the Hedgehog and comic books and their legal struggles, but
maybe we'll look at the end. You could talk about Sega problems for 4, 5,
Oh,
6, 7,
man.
3-hour episodes.
Oh,
Is there a bigger fall from grace in video game history than Sega?
Oh, sure. Sega's still a brand. I mean, it's still an
But
IP.
even after getting rid of the hardware and focusing on video games, they really haven't made very many good video games.
Oh, sure they have. You just haven't played them. They've made a lot of terrible games, but they've made some good games too. And they're still a viable company, right? And I would say you could do a lot worse than Sega in 2025.
Well, they need to get their crap together. I'm not convinced they're going to be around in 2035.
I'm not convinced we'll be around in 2035. That's just me.
Hey. So I don't know if this OVA was a success or not. In the US, it reached number 7, I guess, on the Billboard video sales charts. I don't know if that's good. I mean, that's back in 96 or 99 or whatever, who knows. So it seems like that's not where they got their profit. I don't see anything about the Japan sales for the rentals. So I assume they made some money, but I don't know.
I think this movie in America launched simultaneously on VHS and DVD, and I bought the VHS that year. But
poor you.
Well, I still got it. I wish I'd had that DVD. It's now considered a valuable DVD.
Yeah, because you can still use the DVD.
But in my defense, those things cost like $30 in 1999, 2000 Suncoast movie store. That's 1999 money. I can buy you halfway to Sonic Adventure game,
which you probably bought.
I got it for Christmas. Santa Claus left it under the tree.
Oh, I should have asked for the double. I need the movie and the game, Mom.
Oh man!
All right, so talk about the movie. Overall, I did like the movie. I think there's like a sweet spot in like late 90s for these Japanese animations where the animation's still the old school stuff and I like it. And then certain IPs I think go better with it. And I think Sonic is definitely an anime friendly IP, just stylistically.
Do you think they used any CGI for this, or is it all old school technique? Because I didn't see anything obvious other than the title screens.
The title screens were the only thing that looked like that janky old CGI Sega CD-esque, which may have been the technology they used. But no, I don't think so. So I could tell they used some effects, but I think they were more old school.
Yeah.
Like when it was raining and they just blurred the screen, which I hate, by the way. Lazy.
It looks even worse. It's even worse when you're viewing bootleg copies on social media sites like, if not YouTube, then a Daily Motion. I watched a Japanese dub on Daily Motion. Very blurry.
I watched I'm sure it was AI updated, but they cleaned it up a little bit. It was really good animation. But I was thinking when I was watching that rain scene, I'm like, man, if I was looking at this on a VHS tape, especially on a modern television where they just don't look as good in general, like this looks like crap. But anyways, good animation. I did like it. Opening credits, we get Cyborg Sonic, Metal Sonic.
Hyper Metal Sonic.
I like to call him as the S1000.
It's the only time I recall they've called that version of Metal Sonic Hyper Metal Sonic. So I don't know what Japan was thinking. Why is he Hyper Metal as opposed to just Metal Sonic?
Well, they got lazy as the movie went on. They stopped calling him that.
Yeah, Sonic called him just Metal by the end.
The beginning was Hyper Metal Sonic, and then he was Metal Sonic, and then he became Metal as we got acquainted with him.
Gains his
But
personality.
yeah, so we see the Metal Sonic, the S1000 embryo, and you hear Robotnik in the background telling his plans about he needs some Sonic DNA, basically.
Isn't he more of a T800? So an S800, the original Arnold model. He
We can
doesn't.
go that.
He's not amorphous. Pretty
Yeah, you're
solid.
right. S800, we'll call him that. And basically, Robotnik gives away the plan that the majority of the first episode ignores.
Yeah, that's
And
unfortunate.
they're trying to make it look like Robotnik needs help, and he's just leveraging the situation. But before all that happens, they already give it away.
Because it would
But
be totally believable, Robotnik, or as Japan would have called him at this point, Eggman. He could totally be the type to just ask Sonic for help in the Japanese game continuity. He was really evil in most American incarnations at this point, but in Japan, he's a bit more of a complex character. But yeah, they show you what his plan's going to be right at the beginning.
and they give away Metal Sonic.
Yeah,
They could have had a cool reveal. You basically had the Terminator reveal later on.
It looks really cool. It still looks really cool in the beginning, but it's a plot disappointment because, I don't know, they'd have to show you just bits and pieces of it at the beginning so you wouldn't put everything together.
Scream Sega. Ugh,
Yeah.
Scream Sega. I'm not saying they even did it, but the stuff they're associated with, you always have these fumbles for no reason.
Oh, well.
All right, so then we get Sonic and Tails relaxing on the beach.
I like his pad. I like his island that he lives on. I guess it's a floating island, right? It took me a while to realize that was this movie.
It's in the sky. Yeah. I don't know what was more troubling to me, his Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle tail or Tails' voice.
So we're talking about the English dub of Tails, right? I
didn't watch the Japanese version.
I hate the dubbing of this. It is about as bad as it could be with every character involved.
They're all a little bit nasally, and Tails, which has always been a little nasally in all the animation, is like it's just intensified, like multiplied times 10.
Sounds like he's got a cold the whole movie. And the other, I think I've diagnosed the problem with the dub. First one being, in 1999, we all had an idea of what Sonic should sound like. And at that point, it was Jaleel White. Again, a little bit nasally, right? And then we were finally introduced to a new dub with the video games. But I think when ADV was dubbing this, all the English actors were instructed to really extend their words out so that their dialogue could match the mouse movements of the animation.
You may be on to something.
Hey, that's rough.
It's like a nasally Krang.
I've seen
Almost.
that Ninja Turtle dub too, the Japanese OVA for the Turtles. They do the same stuff.
So, anyways, they're hanging out on the beach at South Island, and then I wrote this down not knowing his official name, but I got it right. Old Man Owl shows up.
That's what they call him. Although they rarely call him Old Man Owl, they just call him Old Man, even though he's an owl.
So, is this a canonical character? You are certainly the Sonic expert, and I am not. So
I'm not aware of it. And when I looked on the fandom websites, it seems like this is his only appearance. I legit would have thought he turned up in a comic book at some point. But in the modern Paramount movies, there may be an homage to him, because in the first movie, young Sonic is raised by a large female owl by the name of Longclaw. She has no history prior to that, so I was wondering if these two owl characters are somehow connected to each other.
That sounds creepier than it probably is.
Indeed.
Okay, so Owl is a kind of a bumbling buffoon, but he shows up to fetch Sonic to take him to the president, or to have him go to the president.
I'm not sure what he's the president of, the whole planet, or just...
They don't ever say, but they take Tails' plane, so apparently you have to fly there.
Well,
a lot of water in the air.
Everything's on an island, right?
Yeah, the geography up in the sky to me is a little sketchy. Like, how do you have all this water floating? So it's a little wonky to me.
Yeah, maybe we'll talk more about the geography there.
And the president has a daughter named Sarah. She's a monkey. I think he is.
She's a cat girl. I thought she was a monkey too when I first watched it. I thought she was, because I'd seen Dragon Ball Z a little bit. I thought she was a Saiyan, but she's actually a cat girl.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Cat girl?
She's
That's a cat?
she has ears that are cat ears.
She's got a monkey tail.
It does look like a monkey tail, way more than a cat tail, but
So,
pretty weird.
I will say the president looks more like a cat than a monkey. And that's why I was kind of confused about that situation.
He has pointy ears, but it's almost like it's more elvish ears than an animal man. I think Robotnik is the only pure human on this planet.
That's a strong word.
I know. An
on
Eggman.
both sides of that.
Yeah.
And we find that Robotnik has, quote unquote, kidnapped the president and his daughter, though they're not really fighting him on this. They want Sonic to listen to him. And Sonic says, I'm kidnapping them to make you be a good guy, as opposed to just asking him to be a good guy.
Wait, who says what now? I missed that.
Well, Sonic shows up and Eggman's in the president's seat.
Oh,
they get ready to kind of fight. And then the president says, wait, Sonic, listen to what he has to say. And that's where Robotnik gives this fake scheme, which we know is fake because the first 30 seconds of the movie.
Sonic assumes he's putting him on too in his defense.
Well, I think they all assume something's up, but
Tails is more open-minded. Yeah.
Well, it's one of those, we all know what's going to happen, right? But for the purpose of the story, like, this is a story as old as time, right? Like, they fake being good, and then they come around at the end. I mean, let's take Norman Osborn in every comic he's ever, every storyline he's ever been.
That's fair. And, to be fair, a lot of the Sonic games kick off with Eggman. I shouldn't say a lot, but a few of them do kick off with him seemingly either being reformed or having been overtaken by some other villain. Very Dr. Wily as well. Very Dr. Wily.
You can even say he is reformed, and then he gets tempted back to the dark side. I mean, there's multiple ways you can do this, but giving it away in the first 30 seconds is not what I would call the right way. By the way, is his name Dr. Ivo Robotnik in, like, all the storylines? I'd never heard Ivo.
I believe that was an invention of the American manual, that they gave him a first and last name that he did not have in Japan, but Japan, I think, has been open to embracing that. Even as American games start calling him Eggman, Japan throws a bone to America. Because let's be honest, Japan doesn't deserve Sonic. I mean, they just don't love him over there like he deserves. And he was created to appeal to Western audiences, very intentionally so. He is inspired by Mickey Mouse and Felix the Cat. A lot of those old black and white cartoons.
He could do a Mickey Mouse team-up now. Public domain.
Oh, he could. I think with all of Sega's legal troubles, they wouldn't want to risk anything with Disney. I've heard rumors before about Disney buying Sega, but I'll believe it when I see it.
Goodness.
Yeah.
I'll keep my mouth shut. But there's some jokes to be had there.
Yeah.
So the Robotnik has kidnapped the president's daughter to force Sonic to be a good guy and save the world by morning. Apparently he's got this machine that's being overpowered and it's going to blow up or something like that.
The electricity generator.
Yes. And the real problem is the giant mecha named Metal Robotnik.
Was it Robo Robotnik or Metal? What did he call it?
Metal Robotnik in America. It was Black Eggman in the Japanese release.
Yeah, okay.
So that might be a change for the better. And basically the Metal Robotnik has kicked Eggman out of his own city of Robotropolis, or as I like to say, Dino Manhattan is what it reminds me of.
In the Japanese, it's Eggman Land, which was probably the first, which got worked into the games later, but that was probably the first appearance of it.
Does that sound better in Japanese than America?
Eggman Land? He loves putting his face on everything he's built, so of course he's going to call it Eggman Land.
I think calling him Eggman, there's something funny about that. But this is like a destroyed post-apocalyptic New York City in Eggman Land. It sounds like a theme park.
So I think he built Eggman Land in the ruins of old New York. I think that's the idea we're supposed to conclude there.
Yeah. We'll get to that in a little bit. And so they reluctantly agree, and Eggman gives Knuckles a smartwatch. He does not trust it with Sonic.
Tails.
I said Knuckles. I meant Tails.
Get your animal buddy correct.
He gives Tails the Apple Watch, and he does not trust it with Sonic.
Sonic doesn't want to wear it either. He thinks it's going to blow up.
And they take a plane, and they kind of follow the GPS Apple directions that they've loaded into it.
It's surprising they've never been there before. Because you would think Sonic and Robotnik would have a lot of a history at this point, because he and Knuckles have had a history. But they never been to his home base.
No. By the way, the president and Sarah, are they found anywhere else in the Sonic verse?
Not to my knowledge. They might have had cameos in comic books, but no serious reuse of their characters.
Okay. So they ride Tails' plane, and they ride through a wicked tornado, trademark, and they get to the Land of Darkness.
Did you know that's the name of Sonic's plane, the Tornado?
Really?
Yeah.
I did not.
Well, there you go. Flies it, but it is Sonic's plane, and presumably it's one of the things he just found on his island, and he needed somebody to get it working for him, and Tails was able to do that.
I always assumed it was Tails' plane.
Because, he's always working on it, but
So he's just a lowly mechanic who works for Sonic, and that's why Knuckles can call himself Sonic's best friend.
Yeah, Sonic has his name on the plane, so it is his airplane. But Tails does all the
pays
work.
The bills. He's got his little ward. Once they get to the Land of Darkness, they eventually take a warp pipe to Dinotopia's ancient relics, or Dino Manhattan, Robotropolis.
I was unfamiliar with that. The warp zones in Sonic lore. That's really not something that exists. He can travel to zones, even a special zone, but it's rare that they just use the term warp zone like it's a Mario Brothers game.
Yeah, I assume that it's an allusion to those crystal zones or whatever.
Yeah.
I forget the exact name in the original games.
Special
Did they keep those
stages.
in later games?
For the most part. You talk about Chaos Emeralds and special stages?
Yeah, the run around and picking up your free stuff.
Yeah, not in every game, but it's still a tradition of Sonic lore.
Okay. So I think at this point they're just using the Apple Watch to try to get to the main base still. And they run around, and then the Metal Robotnik shows up. And he looks like a mix, for me, between an owl and Onslaught, the Marvel character.
That's good. I like the Onslaught comparison. Yeah, that's...
And then he became a Bat Gremlin, so I don't know what's up with that. But nothing really screams Eggman, like, at all.
I'm a little disappointed they didn't use one of the designs from the Egg Robot suit from the Sonic games. But, Black Robotnik or Black Eggman, it's...
Did they even give him a mustache? I don't even think he has a mustache, which is probably the problem.
Huh. Bit of a disappointment, isn't it?
Yeah. He's kind of overrated anyways, as we'll see.
Yeah.
And this is where I made a note that Sonic lends well to the animation style, especially from 80s and 90s. And then we are introduced to Indiana Knuckles.
Oh.
I'm not really sure why he lives there.
Well, and here's the ironic part. In Sonic the Hedgehog 3 16-bit, Knuckles is introduced as an echidna who lives on a floating island, which Sonic uses an airplane to fly to since he's regular planet Sonic.
So they flipped it.
Yeah, Knuckles is living in the subterranean, what do they call it? The Land of Darkness? Not the Land of the Sky.
I think they're in the city at this point, actually, but yeah.
But he's on the outskirts, because he just digs through the ground, and by the way, some people say the movie assumes he's a mole, as opposed to an echidna, anteater type creature. And I can see that in this movie. And in Knuckles' original conception, the designers were trying to make him a bit of a Jamaican. That's why he has dreadlocks, and that's why his shoes have the color scheme that they do. But in this movie, he's Australian, mate, for some reason. And he's got a hat on, like Crocodile Dundee.
Yeah, and he's got socks and shoes that you would have seen in, like, the early 90s, late 80s on little girls. All the colors.
I forgot. I thought the shoes were about like they were in the games, though, because they always did that red, yellow, and green color scheme, like the Jamaican flag.
Okay. Well, he kind of joins them, helps them fight off Metal Robotnik a little bit, and then they head to the main fortress.
Which is in Eggman, so actually in Eggman land. They got to go inside of it.
Yeah, and then they all travel there, and we see Sonic running fast. We see Tails flying, and Knuckles just kind of floats very fast from point A to B. I'm not really sure what effect they're going for.
Yeah, it's odd.
But nothing's moving. He just kind of like hovers.
Because he's supposed to glide. He's not supposed to hover in the air like Superman.
Okay, I was going to ask you, I couldn't remember how he traveled in the comics.
So, yeah, the glide position is usually fist out front and allow his dreadlocks to catch in the wind, and so then he just uses that. But yeah, they do an odd cheat with him in this movie.
Okay, and this is where I think we transition to the second episode if you're watching the Japanese version. But they get into
mugs for the camera at the end of the first episode.
Oh yeah. So they get into Robotropolis, and they find the big generator that's the heart of the problem, so to speak, and they do a little conveyor belt. Seems like they're working too hard to get what they want done. Yeah. But eventually they push the button to stop it, and that's when Sonic gets tricked, and he's trapped, and they check his DNA, and he's apparently 33% French and 20% Australian or something like that.
I didn't catch that.
And, well, I'm making it up.
Oh. I thought you read the stats on the...
No, he wanted to know his ancestry. And
well, he's going to have to delete that stuff from 23andMe. They went bankrupt, apparently.
Yeah, any of our listeners, you were stupid enough to do that, go get your data deleted before they sell it, because they're bankrupt.
Man, I'm so glad I have no interest in my genealogical history. Oh, man. Oh.
And then we have the opening scene from Terminator, and you have...
Oh, it's great.
The electric Skynet spear, and the Terminator pops out of it. Not wearing clothes, just Metal Sonic.
Yeah, straight up.
And then we have something that's... All right, this makes no sense. You get blue sparkles floating around, and it's as if it is the ghost of the Metal Eggman. And then they kind of converge, and Metal Eggman rises from the wreckage. And then the wreckage falls apart, or the rejuvenated Metal Egg falls apart, and Eggman and Sarah are birthed. Like, what's going on here? Am I missing something?
You're not following that? Yeah, you are missing something. So, okay, let me summarize it for you, see if you remember what you missed. So when Sonic and Tails are flying on the tornado, the airplane, they're flying to the land of darkness. Sonic, or one of them makes the comment, "I wonder how Sarah is doing." And they cut back to Eggman and Sarah playing a fighting video game in the presidential palace.
It reminded me of college.
Yeah, so they make a weird cut back to the plane, then back to the video game for no reason. And then...
she wanted to drive.
Because that was Metal Robotnik showed up, or whatever we're calling him. Black Eggman.
I guess I didn't catch that it was Metal Robotnik that they got into.
Yeah. That thing busted through the palace, the belly compartment opened, Sarah jumped in first, Eggman went in after.
I just thought it was this normal egg plane that he rides around in.
And
maybe stole from Dr. Wily.
Maybe you missed it again at the conclusion of the first episode fight with the robot. When they leave, Sarah and Eggman briefly come out of the robot, and she threatens him that if he's going to hurt her Sonic, she'll never forgive him or whatever, and she beats up on him a little bit.
Okay. All right, I must
you
have
missed that. All right.
Yeah, at least the second part. I mean, I saw the first part, I just didn't realize it was the Metal Robotnik.
Yeah, so they've been in that the whole time, which is weird. Because it's an odd plot point. I'll give you that.
Well, I think it's sloppy.
All right.
I watched it twice and I didn't pick up on that. So
fair. Hey, I didn't pick up on the fact that Sonic's island was floating. It's odd plot logic. I'll give you that.
And then basically, Metal Sonic kicks Sonic's tail.
Yeah, it's not even close.
Not his friend Tails, but his actual
Sonic
tail.
Doesn't really attack him. It's almost like he's trying to lead him away from everybody else.
I think he's just trying to get in a position to do anything, but he gets run over like a freight truck. And then, question here, Cybertruck Sonic, does he run or fly in the normal canon?
His feet never touch the ground, canonically.
Okay, so he is a hover device of some sort.
It's out of his back. He has rockets, big one in his back, and then probably a few in his feet that allow him to hover.
Okay.
Which is kind of funny because I think Eggman calls him a full battle robot that's like the baddest thing on the ground, or the baddest thing on 2 feet. It's because his feet never touch the ground. Yeah.
Funny. So Tails and Knuckles, they decide, screw this, we're abandoning Sonic and we're going home. And then Sonic gets kicked into space. His health meter goes out. He's no longer a pain in Eggman's egg. And then Sonic's not dead. He's suddenly not dead. And he decides to go home.
Very odd transition there. Especially if it has to do with warp zones. Did everybody just find a warp zone separately?
Well, I think Tails and Knuckles, just go back the way they came. That's kind of the way I took it. But Sonic, he gets kicked. They show his heartbeat stops, but then he's not dead.
Yeah, it slows down like Superman. They're crossing over this month. DC Comics and Sonic the Hedgehog comics.
So if Sonic can't breathe underwater, how can he breathe in space?
Oddly, that's canon. He's always been fine in outer space. I don't know why, but canonically, Sega doesn't ever want him to swim of his own power. But they're perfectly fine with him outright breathing in space. It happened in the new Paramount movie. It was not an issue, Sonic being on the moon or in outer space.
That's so weird.
It is, but can Mario breathe in? Well, Mario used to not have a problem with water. Then when he went to 3D, they gave him an air meter. But what about space?
I'd have to think about it. I want to say they gave him spacesuits recently, but he was in Super Mario Galaxy, so maybe not.
So I am not familiar with a reason why he can breathe in space, but it's fairly consistent he's okay in outer space. The only problem with outer space is he's liable to burn up on re-entry if he's outside the atmosphere.
Well, he doesn't burn up in re-entry on this one as he lands on, I guess, home, but
Yeah.
I don't know. And then we see Tails and Knuckles. They went back to Sonic's actual house. They find Old Man Owl's wearing some funny clothes. And then Tails has a philosophical discussion with Knuckles and concludes that Sonic and the Terminator Sonic are identical twins now as he works on the smartwatch.
Yeah, that the robot has all of his memories and most of his personality. He simply wants there to only be one Sonic, is the idea there. And he thinks it's going to be him, not the original.
Now, maybe you could tell me why it does make sense, but Knuckles wants to one-up Tails on the philosophical discussion, and he's narrating the plot along to the president about how the world's going to be destroyed. And they are very adamant they don't want Sonic to hear it. And that's a little unclear. But then Sonic has apparently overheard the entire conversation. So now Metal has learned how to destroy the world by Sonic overhearing the conversation because they're identical twins and they don't just have the same memories, but they have the same present. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, I think you're right. I thought I was listening to a bad dub on the English bit, but I think that's the idea, that whatever Sonic learns or even thinks about, Metal will do the same thing, because they are linked somehow with that DNA consciousness transfer, whatever they did.
Now, most of this is pointless because Tails still reprogramming the Terminator with his smartwatch. He's just struggling to get that Bluetooth to connect with each other. Sonic's Bluetooth, Terminator's Bluetooth just ain't syncing up, and he's struggling with that. So they end up fighting for quite a while as Tails working on that. But eventually, Tails gets the Bluetooth to connect, and the Terminator Sonic kind of comes around, kind of goes T2 mode.
Yeah, not clear
Very
why,
busy
but
scene.
It looks great. I mean, it exists for the fight.
And basically, the babyface turn happens when the president and a couple of other people, or I think the owl, they're in a car that's stuck where some lava is going to be getting to. So there's almost a car fire, and then it blows up, and the T2 Sonic comes out, and he's rescued all the farm animals.
But he's worse the wear for it.
Yes, and he dies a Terminator 2 death because, as we learn in Highlander, there can be only one.
And Sonic tries his best to save poor Metal, but Metal doesn't want to be saved.
No, but he does want to drag his half-destroyed carcass up the side of the mountain to Sonic. And he says in a very unintimidating fashion, there can only be one Sonic. Or there is only one Sonic, something to the effect. But it's a very girly robot kind of voice. And then he refuses Sonic's help, and he slides down the lava and dies.
Yeah.
But did he drag himself up just so Sonic would be tragically scarred and see his identical twin die? Like, what was the point of this?
He has a flair for the dramatic, just like the original Sonic.
So a lot of Terminator vibes, a little bit of Star Wars that wasn't really around yet vibes. And maybe they copied this movie.
They should.
When Anakin's dragging himself around, I don't know. Makes you wonder. And then the movie pretty much wraps up. Nothing really interesting at the end. Other than the disc containing Sonic's DNA accidentally gets destroyed. So Eggman cannot make a new one.
Remind me, I've forgotten what happens to Eggman at the end of this. What's the last thing we see him doing?
He is driving around the monkey crew chasing Sonic and Knuckles, who are play fighting, basically.
They make Eggman take everybody back home, right?
Well, Knuckles punches Sonic because earlier in the movie, Sonic accidentally stepped on him. And then they get to a chase, and then all the others are following behind. I don't know if they're actually going home or they're just instructing Robotnik Eggman to chase. But it just makes a little scene at the end where they can do a freeze frame, basically.
Yeah. And then I was trying to see somebody else I've forgotten about. Get the owl, the president. So Sonic and Sarah, they never make out or anything, right? Let's just get that off the table. There's no...
Now, Sarah's a very anime Japanese character for the late 90s. Fits in the way they always did them back then. But it's still mostly G, I would say.
In 2006, Sega gave us our first human woman on Sonic kiss, and nobody's been able to forgive them for that later. But
well, this is a monkey cat, so I don't know if that counts anyways.
I don't know if it does either, but she's very humanoid, other than a couple of distinguishing...
Other than her ears, possibly her nose, her head to her tail, so to speak, is very human. You just got the tail and some facial features, basically.
I appreciate them restraining any kind of weird romance with that, even though there's various points where she seems to have a crush on Sonic, and he's willing to do stuff because she asked him to do it. In my opinion, I think they should have just used the Amy Rose character for that role in the movie instead
Now,
of
did
the
she
original.
exist yet?
Yeah, she's in Sonic CD 1993. So she predates Knuckles. They very much could have put her in, and she plays a lot of the same role as Sarah does, but they went with Monkey Cat Girl because hey, it's Japan. What else do you expect from them?
Yeah. Now, did anyone know who Amy was yet? Common people.
It's fair. They had shelved her for a few years from the Sonic games, and I don't think she got a second appearance. I want to say until the racing games. That's when they
Okay.
started bringing her back. So they did a kart racer on Game Gear, and then they did the underrated Jim, in my opinion, Sonic R on the 3D consoles and later the PC. So she was in that, but she wasn't really fully reincorporated into the main Sonic cast until Sonic Adventure in 99 or 98.
Okay. Because, I mean, I don't know if I ever played Sonic CD. Obviously, I'm not saying it was a bad game. I'm sure it was great. But it was on the Sega CD, which no one bought. So it's one of those... If you might have seen the picture of the character, but if you may not have actually seen a character in action.
It's worth acknowledging a lot of Sonic games I did not play on a console for the first when I was introduced to them. Sega, a little bit desperate. Now people may argue whether this was a good or bad idea, but Sega got into the PC port game, and they took a lot of their games that maybe didn't sell terribly well on CD-based formats like Sonic CD. Not saying, but just because of Sega CD. It was a good selling game on the console, but they did that, and then they did a lot of their Saturn games. They ported them to PC.
Well, they had that. I can't remember which system it was on. I assume the Saturn, possibly the Dreamcast, where they had the collection and they kind of had the overworld level of Sonic in a 3D form.
That is Sonic Jam, baby. Sonic Jam. But that was exclusive to the Saturn. Never been ported. And it's a shame because that's one of the best Sonic compilations they've ever done. Simply because it wasn't just a ROM copy. It was take the games, and they probably still had a little bit of the source code laying around. Because they were able to go in and make little changes to them. In some cases for the better. But it's a shame that game is probably trapped forever through emulation or the aftermarket of Saturn copies.
Yeah, I never had that game. I bought a clearance Saturn at Kmart in like 6 games, and I think I paid a total of like $100. It was the clearing the inventory kind of thing. Oh yeah,
and I
think I sold it to you. Or
no,
gave it to you,
we traded for it, and it's
okay.
one of the greatest. I am so glad I get to own your inbox Saturn because I fell in love with that thing. Man,
it was a good system. The problem I had was there was no way to get new games at that point. So
and from American, the best Saturn games were in Japan that never came over. And so if you really wanted to enjoy the Saturn, you pretty much have to import a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and this is the pre-Amazon days. Like you can import anything for cheap now. It was
good luck.
You're paying twice as much for back then, and they probably didn't even give you the courtesy of English subtitles. So
not in a lot of cases, no. But yeah, it was a weird time.
Well, and a lot of the good games were RPGs too. So American audience kind of SOL.
The 2D fighting games were excellent, and a lot of those never came over to America. Yeah, just shame.
Yeah. Sega gonna Sega.
Well, and you can't blame Sega purely because the market had just become so obsessed with 3D games that even if you have 2D games and they look great, nobody's willing to take the risk to publish them in America because they don't think anybody's going to be interested. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong. But you have a lot of those Capcom games. They were published in America by a company like Acclaim, and they weren't going to take the risk on all of those games. They only brought a few of them over.
Oh, I understand. I'm just saying they fumbled the Saturn in the first place, freaking out over commercial.
That's fair.
All right, so Sonic the movie, or Sonic the Hedgehog the movie, OVA. What are we going to rate this thing on?
Hopefully not monkey tails. What else we got? Old owls. We got spectacles for old owls. We have... I want to say chili dogs, but Japan was not embracing that aspect of Sonic lore at this point.
I don't think there's a chili dog in this movie.
No, they had not embraced it in Japanese Sonic. But yeah, it's just It's hard to figure out what else to give this movie.
Monkey Tails it is.
Monkey's Tails.
All right. So on a scale of 5 monkey tails,
Yeah.
I think it's a solid 3 or 3.5. I'll give it 3.5.
All
It's
right.
got weird Japanese plot points there. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever, at least to the West. Maybe it made more sense to them in terms of the way they thought through things, but I'll give it 3.5. I really did like the animation. Didn't like the voice acting, but I like the animation. No. Good acting. It moved along pretty good. It didn't seem like a long movie. It wasn't, but it didn't drag on. I'm gonna be kind today for old Sega. I've given them enough crap.
Yeah.
3.5. 3.5 monkey tails. One got snipped.
Yeah, but you snipped that tail. If I were just looking at the English dub, I don't know how high I could rate the English dub just because it just is so bad in points. But I watched most of this again in Japanese, and you can tell the voices are snappier. They don't linger annoyingly like they do. I was so tempted to want to give this 5 out of 5, but the plot is just so silly. And that's fine, but man, I had forgotten how good this thing looks. And I think the pacing is great too. It moves always. It is just pressing along. And I just love the way it understands Sonic as a character. He's a hero, but he doesn't necessarily get up every day with the goal to be a hero. He's living on his own time, and he only gets involved when nobody else can do the work. You see that early in the movie when he's annoyed at Tails, he just wants to hang on the beach. But as soon as he hears Tails really in danger, it flips the switch, and he goes 0 to breaking the sound barrier. I love that scene where Sonic and Tails make their way to the land of darkness, and it looks like they recreate a lot of the animation from the Sega CD intro shot for shot. Not that they're copy-pasting, because they're doing different animation, but it just looks so good, and there were so few examples of trying to transition Sonic into a three-dimensional character. Just the idea of being able to see him from every angle, how his spikes work and his quills and all that. I was trying to think of something else I just really appreciate about this. All right. The philosophy of how should Sonic's abilities work. And there's two schools of thought on how Sonic should generate his super speed. Should he be a primarily momentum-based character, where he reaches top speed because of his use of momentum, rolling into a ball, his unique, just physical characteristics? But at the end of the day, is he more of a super athletic person as opposed to a superhero? Does that make any sense to you, of how he gets his top speed?
Yeah, which is the problem, I think, with the American movie when they try to give him those muscle calves. I view him as more of a momentum kind of, like it's this chaotic energy gets funneled in, causes destruction.
So part of the divide among the fan base, people who like the old Sonic games, the side-scrolling platformers, Sonic never really had a boost button. You know, he can get up to speed and he can roll along, but the only way you get him at a amazing speed is you use the environment or you get certain power-ups. But in the modern games, yeah, you can do that. There's power-up, there's springs too. You can get the super shoes or whatever. But when they started going to the 3D games, they started with some momentum-based, but then they quickly moved to what they call it the boost system, where you just get to a point where you have long, fairly flat sections of a level, and you just hit the button, and maybe you have a stamina meter, and it's just like everything blurs around you. Like he's going into the Speed Force, like he's the Flash. And there is a disconnect on which makes more sense to make Sonic the best character in the best game that he can be. And a lot of people agree, ideally, if you want to make a great game and you want to make Sonic as interesting as he can be, you go for the idea that he's just super athletic and he uses his environment to reach those speeds. But this movie does a little bit of both, and I appreciate that, because he does all that movement and it looks great, but there are certain moments when you see it's advantageous for him to just hit his afterburners, and it does that figure 8 animation that Sonic CD originated. So he can do that, but there's just little detail that I just love. When they warp to old New York City, Sonic has just been hitting the turbos, trying to get away from the robot, and he hit the brakes a bit to go back and grab Tails, and then he hit the afterburners, and when he gets to the new city, he has to catch his breath a little bit. Tails is actually more winded than he does, but he just needs about 2 or 3 seconds to catch his breath, and then he's good again. And I like that a lot. I wish more people, even the official Sega stuff, would look at Sonic that way to make him the best kind of character that he can be. So much as I'd love to give this movie 5 out of 5 because of what it embodies the best about the character, I guess I'll give it 4 out of 5. Cat monkey tails. The plot is just ridiculous, and you can point out the flaws and how it gave plot points away and weird transitions.
It loses a little bit just for the first 30 seconds, honestly, in my opinion.
Well, the transitions with the whole stuff with Metal and Sonic and everybody going back home for the third act of the movie to set up. Yeah, and there's not a whole lot of weight to the story. I don't know if an audience member, are you emotionally prepared to be invested in Metal Sonic making a babyface turn and then sacrificing himself? I don't know if that comes across as effective as it should be. It probably needs a little bit more build-up.
All right, with that was Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie. And yeah, it's got tails in it. A couple of different kinds.
2 of them. 2 tails.
3 tails. Maybe 4. President?
It's such a weird lore that's never been revisited again. Yeah.
Probably for better. All right, thanks everybody.
Bye-bye. Toot toot, Sonic Warrior.